Welcome to this unusual and fourth episode of the Chestnut Bookcase. It's an absolute pleasure to do this in a completely different way today. We're live at London Chess and Bridge with Grandmaster Daniel Fernandez and Roshana. Roshana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm Roshana Kelly of Helping with Thinkers Publishing. And I'm just going to be a sidekick today and learn also a bit about chess. I know a little bit only, so...
A little bit. Well, I mean, you're the professional when it comes to podcasts, and we're doing our best here. I mean, we're actually in the middle of the shop, so people might be walking past as we engage in this interview with Grandmaster Daniel Fernandez. To wit, let me introduce our guest. It's a pleasure to have across the board from me here Grandmaster Daniel Fernandez. He's a distinguished chess grandmaster and author. He began playing chess at the age of just 7, quickly ascended the ranks and became an international master in 2010 and then grandmaster in 2017. And throughout his career, Daniel has represented both Singapore as well as England in international competitions, and I believe also in the Chess Olympiads. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I played 2 Chess Olympiads for Singapore.
2 Chess Olympiads.
Wow.
He's also a well-known and loved chess author, and probably a few of your books are in this shop as well at the moment. Welcome to the Chestnut Bookcase.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. Now, I wanted to just dive into some questions relating to your career. We've got it all printed out here because, you know, that's a clever idea. I would have had it on my phone. But maybe I can begin with, you know, balancing. You're a high-end academic. You know, you're into computer science and you've studied mathematics. How do you balance that and be a chess grandmaster? You know, how do you juggle all of the balls?
Well, I'd say I left that side of academia some time ago. It was quite difficult in 2017 when I was trying to finish my first degree as well as become a grandmaster.
Yeah.
After that, I did a master's in Australia, but I wasn't playing chess so much.
Right.
And I've not really continued with that academia since then. I had a number of jobs in IT, during which time I guess I didn't make particularly any chess progress, at least in terms of rating.
Yeah.
I would say in general chess hasn't always been my top priority, and probably that's the way it should be.
Yeah. That's fair enough. I mean, I think it's entirely fair. Now, I'm going to ask Roshana as well, just to chip in with any questions that she's got at any point to make this a dynamic conversation. But feel free to just jump in at any point. Now, in my first interview, or second, I think it was, with Jana Krivets, it occurred to me in reading her book that probably the Caro-Kann is more suited to me as a player. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to switch away from the accelerated dragon and do something a little bit different. Only at my level, you know, so it hardly makes a difference, and I'm only playing bullet chess. But I did start to study the Caro-Kann. And at the beginning of your book, and this is where I first learnt your name, was reading your Caro-Kann book. You describe your chess style you have a proclivity to assess dynamic positions, to where lots of pieces are on pre, where you seem to like that sort of, and you acknowledge that that's your bias, but you're going to be try to be a bit more well-rounded throughout the book. How would you now define your approach to the game? Has it evolved over the years?
I think it has evolved, and I think perhaps me personally in the opposite direction to a number of others, where my chess has actually got more chaotic.
More chaotic?
More chaotic. So there's a stereotype, I guess, that chess players become more endgame focused and more positional as they get older, and I think I've become the opposite. So it's unclear how that will age going forwards, but so far that seems to have been the evolution.
Yeah. Well, speaking of age, It was your birthday recently, I've been told, so happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, big, yeah.
Big 3-0.
The big 3-0.
Has that changed anything in your in how you think about things in life and towards chess and everything?
It hasn't really sunk in yet, I think,
Okay.
the milestone. I still feel somewhere in my 20s, I'm not sure precisely where, but it hasn't sunk in yet. I'm 30.
That's a
Yeah.
good thing.
That's a good thing. You know, I'm going to be 50 this year,
Wow.
and that hasn't sunk in at all.
Well, age is just a number, right?
Age is just a number, absolutely. And it's also, you know, you can tell with how well your knees are as well. Now, later on, I'm going to ask Daniel to show us his favourite game. I'm not going to do that now, simply because we've got a cable across the table, so we're going to come back to that, and I'm really looking forward to that. But you became a Grandmaster in 2017. What was the most challenging part of becoming a Grandmaster?
So I actually had a number of critical games towards the end, and it took me about 6 tries, I think. So I got my rating, which needs to cross 2500 to become a Grandmaster. I got that to like 24.97 or 98, and I was just trying to win these games, but I couldn't for 5 or 6 tries. And then at the end I got a draw in the Serbian team championship, which took me just over the line. So that was the struggle.
Yeah.
Really. For some people, they struggle to make the norms, which is another part of the requirement.
So when you got that draw, did you know then that you had achieved the title?
Yes.
How did that feel?
Honest answer, closure.
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 I see.
Because I've been chasing that probably more than anything else for the previous 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think I knew I would get it at some point, or at least I wasn't prepared to accept not getting it.
Yeah, okay.
And so there was just a sense of completion there.
Yeah. I mean, did you go out and celebrate though?
Like,
You didn't.
no.
Fascinating.
I understood, I think, on quite a deep level that would be a good time to leave the game if I was going to, and focus on other things. As the record will show, I didn't.
Fair enough.
It's so fascinating, everything that you're telling about this chess and how you have become so well in the game and everything. Have you has it been? Have you always had that? When did it start? Like in your life, as a young child, at what age did you become fascinated with chess?
So I think I really became hooked around the age of 10.
Wow.
Learned the rules a number of years earlier, but became hooked at the age of 10. At the time I was living in Singapore, and that was when I recall my father took me for my first international trip for chess, and that was to Thailand.
To Thailand, wow.
Yeah.
To have a,
Yeah, that was the Southeast Asian Boys Championship under 10.
Oh.
And went there with friends from Singapore at the time, and it was just a really good experience. And I think that's when the chess bug was really
Released.
yeah.
Wow. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
It's
indeed.
nice to see how people evolve in their talents. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, on development, my limited experience of chess improvement, I've noted moments of where the penny drops, you know, where I think, crikey, now I understand something significant that I didn't before. And for me, one of those moments was learning about prophylaxis in chess, anticipating the opponent's plan. And for me, that made sense of a whole bunch of different things all in one. Were there any particular penny drop moments in your journey right through to Grandmaster and being an elite player that you could recount for us?
I couldn't say exactly the moment at which the penny dropped, but at some point in the last 2 years, I've become very conscious of the fact that in every chess game my opponent is also myself, if that makes any sense. So I have to battle against, internal pressure to be arrogant, to overestimate my own position, to perfectionism, for example. I also need to fight against the urge to be a perfectionist, because then I'll run out of time.
Yeah.
And quite a lot of the game has to do with overcoming those internal biases as well as the adversary across the board.
Yeah. Goodness.
That's right.
And what a thought. You know, you've been a grandmaster for however many years, and just in the last couple of years, that's been a significant penny drop moment.
Yeah. It could have come a lot earlier.
That's the thing about chess, though, isn't it? There's so many layers, and I probably the better you get, the more layers you realise just how there are, how many there are in the game.
Very interesting.
Now, you've competed against some of the strongest players in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Who's been the toughest opponent, and why? Perhaps relating to your previous answer, was there an internal struggle with one of them, or?
Yes. So, out of the top English players, I've never got a result against Michael Adams, who's got a reasonable claim to be the best ever English player.
Yeah.
I've played him 3 times with black, and I've lost every time, not with a great struggle. So that's something I'll be looking to address.
Yeah. Do you think it becomes a psychological issue after a while?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on the other side of a few of those with slightly lower rated players.
Right.
As well. It's quite difficult to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mickey Adams, I mean, if there was anybody to lose to in the UK, then surely that's the one. Now, I wanted to move on to chess writing and thought processes, because at the moment we've just been talking about his chess career and his playing style. You've written 3 books. What is it that you love about writing about chess?
I think I enjoy the process of making my own thoughts coherent in that way, because my internal chess monologue is not particularly coherent by itself, and just producing something on a page that is understandable, not just to future me but to other people, is quite satisfying.
Yeah.
I think when I wrote the Karo Khan book, I was motivated by wanting to make it playable for myself as well. And when I wrote the Tata Steel book, I was intrigued about how elite level chess was developing during the pandemic.
Right.
So I was kind of making sure I stayed in touch with that myself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say then that you write for yourself?
In a way, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that. As an author myself in a very different field, I write for myself. Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
Now, in your annotations, I mean, in thinking the Karo Khan book here, but I'm sure it applies more generally. You focus on, deep strategic principles. It's not just about I move there, he moves there, I hope for the best. There's an underlying sense of a deep strategic grasp of the game. Is there any particular strategy that you think club players, like myself, just continually misunderstand or underestimate?
Okay, I think I want to give 2 answers there. The first one is that I think most people don't understand how exchanges work, and that each exchange must benefit someone, usually. There's very seldom such a thing as a neutral exchange.
Right.
Usually one side is looking for it. And I think that insight itself, if kind of put into practice into your games, not specifically yours, but into one's games, it may add about 100 or 200 points playing strength.
Huh.
The other one is that, I think you alluded to this a bit when you were talking about my writing style, we are quite dependent on engines currently, and that shows no sign of abating at all.
Yeah.
If anything, it's a bit of an arms race to see who can memorize more variations. But I think one thing that's been helping me recently is using the engines more as a blunder check.
Okay.
So I kind of trust myself, and I think people in general should also trust themselves, regardless of their level, to assess a position.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to very concrete differences between moves, that's where the engine is more useful.
Yeah.
So I've stopped paying attention to the +0.3s, the +0.7s, and so on.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of using it to refine my analysis on a deeper level, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe, certainly someone like myself, and probably not for a grandmaster like yourself, but if I can understand what's going on as well, and articulate the logic of the position to myself, then I can play it easier. If it's just a random line that has an H4, H5, and I don't know why, then even if it's a 0.7 instead of a 0.3, it's not going to help me much.
Yeah.
And so I like that, the blunder check. Yeah, indeed. Now we're going to move into a quick fire round.
Okay.
I hope you didn't read these. The idea of the quick fire round is just to get your instant knee-jerk reaction rather than to think too much. If you can do that, that's asking a chess player not to think too much. Let's give it a go. But
Mine is always working.
if any come to mind, I've just come up with a few here. Greatest chess player of all time?
Fischer.
Bobby Fischer.
Okay.
Would you think that's fair? Yeah? You like that?
I don't know too much about the Bobby Fishers and the winner.
Wow.
You'll have to help me out.
I mean, I've got to agree with him there, I'm afraid. Now, this is a bit more of a technical one, but I wanted to ask it, and I wanted to squeeze this in somewhere, because in your book, against the advanced variation on the Caro-Kann, you go for 3 bishop f5, rather than c5. Why?
I think there's more variety in how black can approach the game afterwards. There are less sort of long lines where you have to know the only moves for black.
Right, yeah, fair enough. I've only ever learnt c5, you see, so that's an interesting one. If you had to describe your chess books with 3 words, what would they be?
As in 3 words for all of them put together.
Yeah, or the spirit of them, or, yeah.
We'll go with Labour of Love.
Labour of love.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Nice. Yeah.
Wow. And what is the funniest, most unexpected thing that you ever happened to you in at a tournament?
At a tournament, I won't say which one, but someone offered me money to throw a game before.
Wow.
Oh,
That's
wow.
happened.
Okay.
Offered you money.
Yeah.
So, I would, but I won't pry, because that's clearly not something you can do.
I don't think I can give details
Yeah,
on
of course
No,
you
no,
can't.
no,
No,
no.
but wow, what a thought!
That is.
If anybody wants to offer me money to throw a chess game, by the way, I'd be willing to talk to you about that. Have you ever cried after a loss?
that. Not for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, so not as an adult then.
While I was trying hard to become a grandmaster, it happened a couple of times.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it reminded me of that painful video. I don't know if you saw it, of Ivanchuk after he played a blitz game against Naroditsky. Heartrending wails from him after he blundered in the end game, I think it was. Yeah, it's a deeply emotional game.
Yeah. Is it a lot of preparation that you have to do before that if you go into a tournament like it? Do you take a long time preparing yourself for the game, and what works for you in that?
So, what I'm focusing on now is physical condition in general. When I know my individual opponents, and sometimes you do this before the tournament as well, but when I know my individual opponents, doing some maybe 2 hours maximum work for each one as well. And that tends to take the form of figuring out their general characteristics, not specific lines that they play, but general preferences.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, playing the opponent.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. Now, a little bit about modern chess trends. I wanted to get onto your thoughts. You know, with online chess, with Fischer Random or whatever else we're going to call it, with Blitz and Bullet, probably classical chess remains the gold standard in the eyes of many. But it might be evolving into something new. And this was a question that Roshana wanted to ask as well. How do you see the future of traditional chess evolving?
So I personally don't have a problem with Fischer Random, or freestyle as it's now going by.
Yeah.
At Easter, I'm planning to play the Grenke Open, which is in Karlsruhe in Germany, and they've got a super tournament in freestyle. I think maybe one of the first ones, but anyway, the first one that I've had the chance to go and see.
Yeah.
So that will be an interesting one to spectate.
Yeah.
It does raise existential questions for a lot of people, I think. When there are 960 starting positions, how do you reconcile the fact that you spent so long studying one particular one? I don't have an answer to that, but I think with the way computers are going and the way chess is becoming increasingly a memory contest, something like that is needed.
Yeah.
I also think maybe there's place for other results in chess. I think there's been a proposal that stalemate counts for 3/4 of a point or something like that. Could be interesting as well.
Yeah. 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 To spice it up in some way, that's sort of the draw.
Yeah.
And yeah. And wait, I'm trying to understand what you mean by existential there. Can you elaborate?
Well, I was thinking that if someone had spent 20 years of their life, studying opening theory and such like of this position, and now suddenly it's only one out of 960 possible ones, they might feel it's a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah.
But I would make the case that it's not wasted as long as they've been intentional about it.
Understood. Yeah. Thanks. Well, a little bit more fun now. I don't know whether this question is going to make sense, but do you have any controversial opinions about chess that you'd like to share? Maybe you don't.
Controversial. Oh, how's this? So, gender imbalance in chess.
Oh, yeah.
Not everyone is prepared to go there, but
No, we did in a previous interview with Jana Krivets, actually, but yeah, go on.
So my theory on this, as a male, as you can see, is that maybe the imbalance is caused by there being so many straight lines in chess.
Go on.
So the feminine brain, by stereotype and by anecdotal experience, tends to work better with waves, curves, and flowing forms, whereas the straight moves of chess may not be as appealing.
Oh.
So a friend of mine came up with an idea for a spiral-shaped chessboard, and it could be that a format like that actually attracts more women than it does men.
Fascinating.
Oh, that's
Just a theory. So
Yeah.
it requires testing on all sorts of levels. But
Well, we have a female of the species actually at the chessboard with us. What do you think of that?
I find it very interesting, all these gender things and to see how people play the game and how the mind works with it.
But your gut feeling to that theory, what do you think?
I think there could be maybe a logic in that I do agree that there are differences in how people think and how they move, and how what Daniel was saying with the different boards. Maybe but I wouldn't really know. I can't.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's very interesting.
That's perfect as it
Yeah.
comes to a controversial opinion. I love that. And the same in a previous episode with Jana Krivets. She also came up with a controversial opinion, which wasn't too dissimilar. Not quite as much about geometry and such like, but in a similar spirit. Now, beyond the 64 squares, again, a question that Roshana wanted us to ask. I think I'll hand over to you.
Oh yeah, I wanted to know also what would you have become if you hadn't played chess in your life? You haven't. What profession would you have?
So when I was 6, before I learned the rules of chess at all, I wanted to become a writer. And I suppose, in a way, I am now.
Yeah.
But that would be something that I actually still want to develop in the future as well.
Right.
Writing, yeah.
When you say writing, you mean fiction?
At the time, it was fiction.
Yeah.
Now it might be something else.
Okay. Yeah.
And what would that something else be?
I think I'm more or less done for now with the technical chess texts, but it could be something that talks about life experience through chess.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting.
Something like, was it Garry Kasparov had his, what was it again? How life imitates chess?
Yes. Well,
something like that.
Greater minds than mine have tried this.
Yeah.
Like British ex-champion Jonathan Rowson.
Of course.
Also wrote a book about a similar topic.
Yes.
So the bar is quite high at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, indeed.
And that would have, yeah.
If you could choose any historical chess player to play against, alive or dead, who would it be and why?
I think I would pick Fischer again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd want to meet him and see what was going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. Now, for those who don't know who Bobby Fischer is, Google it. There's not much more to say there, but I understand that instinct entirely. What's your next chess project that you can tell us about, or maybe your next chess tournament that you're going to be present at?
Yeah, so I've got a few that I'm looking forward to. One is this Grenke event in Germany at Easter. I'm also playing this World Rapid and Blitz team event, which is going to be in London in June.
Right.
I'm quite excited about that because there's me on top board, and then it's just like a lot of talented juniors afterwards.
Oh.
So, in the way, I'm sort of leading the procession there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Play against such talented juniors. Not for a grandmaster, but for someone like myself. Have you got any other questions before we wrap it up?
I wanted to know if anyone, well, you're so talented in your field in chess, is there anything in the family that also shares your talent in chess?
So I've got two younger brothers. One of them is a FIDE master. He lives in London as well, and part of the same scene. My other brother is not interested in chess. He plays 1 minute chess between sets at the gym, which is a different way of doing it, but he's talented in rowing and skiing.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So you learn from each other in different ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Nice question. Thank you for that. Now, well, that's a wrap for today's episode. I'm going to splice in the chess game that Daniel is going to take us through shortly. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and mind of Grandmaster Daniel Fernandez, the Grandmaster who calculates with surgical precision, but also writes about them beautifully, so that even my Caracan repertoire might have a chance against some stronger players. Until the next time, best wishes.
Bye-bye.
Okay, as promised, we've rejigged a little bit here, so I've asked Daniel to take us through his favourite chess game. So, over to you. Maybe you can give us a little bit of the background and where it was played, and then take us through the moves, the key moments.
Okay, so the background to this game is that in November last year, November 2024, I played 3 tournaments, strong tournaments, the European Championship, the US Masters, and a closed tournament alongside the US Masters. And overall, I did relatively poorly. I lost a number of rating points. I made some blunders which I felt were out of character. I rushed at some key moments. However, in the same month, I managed to beat 3 players rated over 2600.
Wow.
And that means roughly world top 100 players. And this one was a game against the highest rated of them all, who was Awonder Liang. I think he's something like 4th or 5th in the US at the moment. And he, I think, was the world number 40 or so. So he was going for this game very much expecting to win, or at least have a very, very good chance of winning. And that shows, I think, in his choice of first move. So after I played d4, which I'm doing relatively seldom recently, he chose to play f5.
Huh. The Dutch,
The
rather
Dutch.
appropriately.
Yes. Now, I don't actually think I've faced the Dutch in a classical game before this point, but over the next few moves, it started to look more like a Sicilian, if you can mentally invert the board.
Yeah.
So d4, f5, if you just replace that mentally with e4, c5. My next move was knight c3, as indeed in the Sicilian, white plays knight f3, and black played knight f6. I went bishop g5, so you can see it's like a Rosalimo variation on the other side of the board. And after black played d5, I took on f6, e takes f6, and e3. I was new to this position, whereas he was playing his moves instantly, so there was some discomfort there. But on the other hand, white does have quite a playable position on general principles, so it feels unlikely to make a big mistake, particularly soon. Black went bishop e6, I played bishop d3, and queen d7. Now, a purist might think that there's a case to be made for developing the b8 knight first, b8 knight maybe to c6, before the queen. And I would tend to agree, because queen d7 gives me time to play my next move, knight ce2. And then if black plays knight c6, I have the option to play c3, which stops it from jumping forwards onto b4 or d4. And in general, this configuration of a pawn being 3 squares vertically from a knight is one of those, I feel, underrated chess themes. I've never seen it talked about in a chess book, at least explicitly. But just noticing that very much restricts what the knight can do. Black castled long. I went knight f4, which is part of my previous plan. Bishop f7. So now, if I don't do anything, black will just chase this knight away again. Black's planning g5, or maybe bishop d6, pressurize that knight, and my blockade of the square doesn't look especially secure at the moment. So to try and delay black playing g6, I went queen c2. Sorry, delay black playing g5, I played queen c2. And now, of course, if they play g5, the f5 pawn is hanging, with a pin on the queen even. And I think mentally people would stop there in general. There isn't much room in the brain for thinking about lines where black gives up the f5 pawn. But at some point over the next couple of moves, black could actually have considered something like that. I think the machine may not hate even queen e8 here.
Queen e8?
Giving up the pawn, bishop takes f5 check, king b8, and later trying to prove that this bishop is misplaced.
I see.
It's very inhuman, I think, to play like that. And black played g6, which feels like the more human way of defending the f5 pawn, more than knight e7, which would have blocked black's f8 bishop. Of course, the downside of g6 is that it's now more difficult to push onward with g5. So I played h4, which is gaining just a little bit more space on the king side. Black went bishop d6, the alternate way of disturbing my f4 knight. I brought the other knight in, knight e2, to support it. And black played knight e7. This is where he actually missed probably the biggest chance he had in the game. And instead of the knight jumping back to e7, black had a very surprising tactic, which is knight e5.
Okay, so pawn takes knight,
Pawn takes
pawn
knight,
takes pawn,
pawn takes pawn.
knight.
My knight is being threatened. But then if I move my
Of
knight,
course,
black's
bishop.
also coming forwards with this pawn, and the d3 bishop is trapped. Now, that's just a like-for-like trade, so it's not especially the end of the world for white. But I think I would probably rather have the bishop rather than the knight in that situation. So black will be benefiting a bit from this trade.
Understood.
But knight e7 was played, I think, neither side was really looking for that motif, although I'll definitely be alert to it from now. After knight e7, I played the move c4, which is a bit psychological in nature, because I understood, and I don't doubt that he understood as well. Probably the best reaction is to take it. And what we could get now is bishop takes c4, a trade of light square bishops, and more pieces come off the board with black still having these double pawns.
Yeah.
And maybe black can take this one as well and offer some more material trades. And they should be completely equal actually in this endgame, despite having a marginally worse structure, because they can maybe use the e-file as well. But I was conscious that probably he wouldn't want to play like this.
Right.
On the basis that I was a much lower rated player.
Yeah.
So indeed after c4, black played move c6, which is addressing my other threat of c5, of course. That will no longer trap the d6 bishop, but it still seems positionally desirable for me to do that and gain some space over on the queen side. So I did that. I played c5, bishop c7, and now the move that I'm actually proudest of in the whole game. Would you like to
Should we have a think?
guess?
Okay.
This is one that the commentators at the time didn't see coming. Naroditsky and Bortnik were giving commentary at the US Masters. So the challenge of this position is that black wants to push g5. They've shored up the f5 pawn, the knight's back on e7 protecting it, the bishop managed to escape from f8, so that's no longer being trapped in. But g5 will need to be addressed.
Yeah. Now, what would address g5 here? Put us out of our misery. I'm just looking at some very random moves here, but I can't penetrate the logic of the position.
So I played the move g3.
G3.
Which doesn't seem like the move that launched 1,000 ships, but on the other hand, what it does is it prepares the g2 square for the knight.
The g2 square for the knight. Where's it going from there?
Which is quite a harmonious square actually, on a deeper level. Black played g5 in the game, and I went knight g2, and the point is that I control f4 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and I'm ready to push f4.
Oh goodness.
So I'm going to put my pawn there as well.
Yeah.
From g2 I support e3 as well, which now becomes the base of my pawn chain. Both e3 and g3 are supported by the knights behind them.
Yeah.
So,
and the result then is that because of this, black's active plan is effectively stopped in its tracks.
yes, and I think maybe this is another moment where the engine wants to play queen e8 and just ditch the f5 pawn because it's not serving black's interest anymore.
Yeah.
Something else which I think is on the agenda is playing bishop h5 at some moment to try and get the bishop, into my position. But sadly here I think it runs into h takes g5, unleashing the rook on the bishop.
Yeah.
So that's also something that queen e8 aims to set up, bishop h5. But black played h6 here, which told me that he was preparing bishop h5, because now h takes could be met by h takes, and black's rook is also unveiled to protect the bishop. I continued with my plan, which was f4, and I think bishop h5 now I would just quite happily meet with king f2, and the bishop can't continue its journey.
Yeah.
I quite like this dark square configuration
Yeah,
I've got going on with the king, sort of providing that.
That's unusual,
supporting
isn't it?
role.
Unusual, really,
Yeah.
this configuration. And you've shored it up so securely now, you can even just calmly step your king over there.
Yeah. Well, the king can go anywhere actually.
Yeah.
I think the knights sort of hold the fought by themselves. If I wanted my king to end up on the queen side, that would probably
Yeah.
be okay as well. Black played rook dg8, so maybe looking forward to some future opening of the g file. Went king f2, rook g7. So black's trying to double, and then maybe there'll be a bishop h5, exchange off this knight, and then the g3 pawn could be weak. So there is a way to slowly break things down if I give black enough time. So I played b4, rook h g8, and now I felt I needed to pay some attention to the king side. Because I think if I allow bishop h5 to happen next, that's not ideal for my g3 pawn.
Yeah, okay.
So I chose this moment to play h takes g5. And black took back. And now I have the h file in my possession. I went rook h6. It's also possible just to leave this as it is, because I don't see how black's breaking through. Maybe I can start with a4, for example.
Yeah.
I chose rook h6, and I think this is out of some desire to minimize chance of losing, actually.
Yeah.
Rook h6. I think the more natural way for black to cover this pawn just being attacked is to play rook g6, which he did. And with only one pair of rooks on the board, I'm less worried about accidents on the king side.
Yeah.
So I played rook a h1. And black understood that the queen side will be broken open. It's just a matter of time before I play a4.
That isn't going away anywhere, is
A5.
it? That's just hovering.
Yeah. And maybe not even opening in the conventional sense, but if I can get my pawns up to a5 and b6 and send the bishop back to b8, then there may be some promotion tricks going on as well.
Yeah.
So the king is not the only target, but it's the main one. Black chose to play king d8 here, just running away from some of those worst case scenarios. And also I've kind of given black something to aim for with this rook on h6. So the king can waddle over to g7 with some gain of time.
And waddle over, yeah.
Yeah. Which was what he proceeded to do. So I played queen b1 here.
Okay.
Maybe it was possible to play a4 instead, but I thought instead of just supporting b5, why don't I arrange, the possibility of playing queen b7 after the b file's opened, and also somewhere at the back of my mind is the idea that the queen can swing across.
Yeah.
Black went king e8, I played b5 consistently enough, and black goes queen c8, which is covering that b7 square I wanted to invade on. And here I start playing slightly slack moves, so the position is at this moment completely winning. Maybe not obviously so, but with some care it should be. But I played queen b4, and this is a bit slow. So the idea, I think, is more or less clear, that I'm supporting the a5 pawn, a5 push. And so if I can get through there and play the b6 that I wanted to, then we'll be in business. But I think it was probably better just to push the pawn with a4, or immediately b6 is also an option. I think b6 is what they wanted in the commentary.
Okay.
Yeah. So queen b4, black chose to take. I went rook takes. And bishop g6. Now maybe there was a small window of opportunity for black to play king f8 here, which chases my rook with, greater speed, I guess. And the point there is that if rook takes f6, black can flick in a pawn trade on f4. And then whichever way I take back, let's say with the e-pawn, black can play king g7, trapping my rook.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that insertion is necessary because if I could take on g5 now, that would support the rook.
Understood.
Yeah. That tactic is maybe not so easy to see though. I don't think either of us did during the game.
Yeah.
Black went bishop g6 instead, so that covers the pawn in a more direct fashion. Bishop g6, I played queen a4. I think being consistent with a4 was actually the right thing to do at this point. I went queen a4, partly trying to target the a7 pawn as well, remind black of that. Bishop b8 played. B takes c6. B takes c6. And I suppose one of the advantages of queen a4 is that I can now play bishop a6 if I want to and start digging behind the c6 pawn.
Yeah.
So that could have been an idea. But then it came to my mind to improve this g2 knight. So it's done a very good job for the last 15 moves or so, holding this f4 pawn and its various friends in place. But I thought, there's no real threat to e3 right now. Why don't we try and bring this to f3? And it's possible that that could have backfired. But I played knight e1, which feels reasonable on general principles, just to bring it to f3. Black played king f7, correctly so I think. Knight f3. And now rook e8.
Rook e8.
Rook e8. So it's a very tricky position to play for both sides. I think maybe the best was king g7. There were definitely a number of alternatives available, but rook e8 is optimistic in the sense that black's trying to look at this pawn and also bring the queen in to attack it. So if black has two more moves, there'll be knight g8 and queen e6.
Right.
I may actually have a problem with this.
Yeah. There's no obvious way to defend it in a single move, is there now?
No, there isn't. So with my next move, I guess I prepared to sacrifice in exchange. I was fully prepared for that. So I went f takes g5, on the understanding that if black plays knight g8, I'm going to need to abandon this rook, because it's less important than the queen e6 takes e3 idea. And here again, I think black's best move was king g7. But I had played, but black played knight g8. And that's obviously very tempting. If I play some move like rook h4 or 3, black is going queen e6,
right.
And then there's nothing I can do about the pawn. But unfortunately, I have a rook takes g6.
Oh, this is nice.
And it turns out to be winning. The variations were more complicated than I thought at the time. So king takes g6, forced. I did briefly wonder if black could play queen e6 anyway, but that seems a bit too optimistic.
So is this the follow-up here, or you're not going to jump in with a knight to f4, or...?
So I went with the knight to h4.
h4.
Just so that I can also take this pawn afterwards and bring my bishop closer to the king. And he played immediately king g7, but it could have been worth checking this variation with king takes g5. And then I will take this pawn with the bishop. Black will go, I believe, queen b7. At least that feels the most natural square for the queen, keeping this protected, not blocking their own bishop, and maybe with an eye coming to b2. And I believe white needs to play queen c2 here.
Right.
Threatening bishop c8 and queen g6 mate.
Yeah.
And then there are some interesting variations from there. I think knight e7 is the best defense.
Did you anticipate him taking with the king?
I did. I think I had no choice apart from rook takes g6 anyway, so we were going to have this position. And
fair enough. Yeah.
I understood, as a matter of faith, that if black's king is on g5, I should have very good play for an exchange. But I didn't see a win here. Later engine analysis showed there is one after knight e7. I think I actually give the bishop anyway on c8. But this didn't happen. So black played king g7. Wherever that is. Pawn on g5, knight on g8. And the bishop here. So knight h4 check, king g7, knight takes f5 check. And now that g5 pawn will be staying alive.
Yeah.
Black went king f8 and g6 came. The point is that g7 will force black's king to an awful place.
Yeah.
But then I can maybe arrange to give queen h5 check,
yeah,
which would be quite nasty. It doesn't even matter how long I take to get there, because I think the knight on f5 covers most of my own vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Black played knight e7, which allows me to win the game by force, but I don't think there was a better defense. So here I played knight d6, forking queen and rook. Black needs to take it. I took back. The e7 knight is now running a bit short of squares.
Yes, for sure.
It luckily still has f5 available. Going back to g8 would be quite depressing, but onward to f5. But I have to move queen takes a7 here.
Ooh. Oh,
And both of these pawns play a
yeah.
big role in attacking.
Yeah.
So I've got
There's a lot of threats here on.
I've got d7, queen f7 mate.
Yeah.
Queen h7 is also a big thing to watch out for. And I think if knight takes d6, that's what I was planning. Knight takes d6, so I believe I was planning queen h7 here. And trying to calculate that to a finish, but it looks like threat of g7 should be decisive quite soon. That was actually played. Knight takes d6, queen h7. So I'm threatening g7. Black went queen g4. And I played knight f4. So there's no particular need to rush this one. Black doesn't have counterplay, and what I'm doing with this move as well is making sure the rook doesn't have a constructive thing to do.
Yeah.
So if rook b8, trying to give this check, I now have g7.
Yeah.
Queen takes g7 and knight
And
e6.
knight e6, yeah.
So black is more or less completely tied down here.
Yeah.
They played rook takes e3 as a final bit of desperation, which I can even take, I believe, because
There's that perpetual there.
yeah, black takes on g3, I go king e2. You need to keep giving checks if you can, because leaving the g file lets me have g7.
Yeah.
I think queen g4, or maybe I can even ditch the knight as well, but I don't think I have to. Let's go king e1, queen g3, check king d1, and sort of slowly slide out this side.
Yeah.
But it's even more clinical to just play g7 check here.
Oof.
Which
Lovely.
will force queen takes g7.
Yeah, and then,
well, he didn't play queen takes g7, he resigned here, but the point is that the rook will be hanging at the end of that line.
Beautiful. What a beautiful game. I
Thank
can
you.
see why you're proud of that. And going back to that knight move, which that shows a tremendous sense of positional understanding and an unusual position as well.
Yeah,
Beautiful. Thank you for showing us that game.
thank you.